Come on, Annie. Let's go to the movies.
This is the Cinereelists, episode 489. My name is Kyle.
My name is James.
And we're here to talk about movies, movie lists, and movie obsession for the next hour or so. James, no Zach this week again.
No Zach, yeah. He's still, what is he doing? I don't even know what he's doing. He's just not here.
He was in Montana.
Okay.
And I believe as of this recording, he is officially back in Orlando. But he got back today or sometime tonight. So no time to watch a movie and definitely no time to record a podcast.
Right. Especially since this week we watched a movie you had to go to a theater for. So
yeah, there was no other way to watch this movie except theater.
Right. And unfortunately, there are no movie theaters in Montana. They don't believe in them. Just no opportunity.
There's a lot of things they don't believe about in Montana, and theaters are one of them.
Right. Yep. Everybody knows that. If they know anything about Montana, it's that they don't have many movie theaters there. So
the Big Sky Country, 0 movie theaters.
Right. Exactly. Lots of movies set in Montana. No screens to watch them on.
but they've never seen them.
Right. Yeah, welcome to the podcast, to you, the listeners, and to you as well, Kyle. Welcome.
Oh, thank you, James. And welcome to you also.
Awesome. We're going to jump into it. We're going to talk a lot of M. Night Shyamalan this week. We saw the movie Old, his latest, and we're also going to run down his entire filmography and rank them in the end. So
this is like an M. Night Shyamalan super episode.
Yeah, definitely. For sure. I can't wait. He's an interesting guy with lots of stuff to talk about.
Yeah, he definitely has a vision and a point of view. So you can't say that he is a mundane director.
For sure. That is the truth. I'm not sure he's a great director either.
No.
He's certainly a director who's capable of making a great movie, but I'm not sure he has the consistency to put him in the great category.
But he definitely has a distinctive style.
That's for sure. Although I also think he tries to switch it up occasionally to varying results. And I think maybe he's forced into switching it up because he has bombs that force him to switch it up. But
right.
We'll get into
inconsistent.
It.
We'll get it. Yeah. We'll save it.
We will definitely save it for later in the podcast. Before we jump into the podcast proper, though, we got to do a little bit of housekeeping, starting with the video version of this podcast. There's a video version of what you're listening to right now. It's sitting there on YouTube waiting for you to partake. Go to YouTube, search Cinereelists, REEL with an S on the end. You can watch this podcast. You can watch our pretty faces while we speak, or just continue to listen. That's fine either way. But it's there for you if you'd like to check it out. You could also support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Cinereelists. Support the podcast. Get extra after show audio. Last week we talked Kyle's top 81 to 90.
Correct.
Or something like that. This week, potentially, we will be doing a part 3 of that series, which would be his
a 10-part series,
71 to 80, I believe. We're counting down his top 100, basically 10 movies.
Correct.
At a time. Yep. So
and this is all in preparation for me to reveal my top 500 or number 401 through 500 on the show.
Right. Exactly.
If you want to find out what my number 200 through 399 is, tough luck.
Yep.
go to my Letterboxd account and you can find it that way.
You got it. Yeah. So check out Patreon if you want to catch those after shows. You could also send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com. Send us a comment, a question, a list, suggestion, any of those kinds of things, and we will read it on the podcast and discuss it. And finally, you please should leave us an Apple Podcast review if you have not done so yet. Super important that we get Apple Podcast reviews from everybody who listens to this podcast, because we're trying to get to that magic number of 200 to get Rotten Tomatoes critics certified. So don't forget to do that if you have not. And that's it for the housekeeping. You ready to talk some M. Night Shyamalan?
I'm ready for some M. Night Shyamalan.
Nice. We're going to start with his latest film. It's a movie called titled Old. It's currently in theaters only. Here's a clip.
We have to get the resort people before they leave. I think we will all have to leave this beach.
Wait, why? They left already. What happened?
We really don't know what happened.
Well, I think this man had something to do with it.
Man, if I was involved, why would I be standing around, bro? Damn.
His nose is bleeding. I think he got that when she was trying to defend herself.
I don't like this dynamic at all.
My nose has been bleeding for hours, man. I don't know why it's doing that.
Charles, something's wrong with your mother. She's asking for you, honey.
Well,
That was Old, directed and written by M. Night Shyamalan, starring Gail Garcia Bernal, Vicky Creeps, Rufus Sewell, Alex Wolff, Thomasin McKenzie, Abby Lee, Nikki Amok Bird, Ken Leung, Eliza Scanlon, Aaron Pierre, Beth Davids, and Emin Elliott. The official IMDb plot synopsis we are not going to read right now because
No.
as it is an M. Night Shyamalan film, there's a little bit of a high concept to this movie. If you've seen the trailer, you know what the high concept is, but there's a chance that some of you have not seen the trailer and might want to go into this movie completely cold, because I think probably you're going to get the best possible experience. If you don't already know what Old is about, then I would say, if you want to watch it, that you should go in as cold as you possibly can without even knowing what the high concept is. So we're going to do just short 30-second to 1-minute reviews each for this movie before we read the plot synopsis. So if you want to be completely cold and know what Kyle and I think about it, that's what we're about to say. And then after that, we're going to move into not necessarily spoilers, but we're going to talk about the movie in terms of spoiling anything that the trailer might have told you about the movie. So if you've seen the trailer, we're not going to tell you anything that the trailer doesn't go into, but you will get some background on the high concept of the film. So before we do that, absolutely 100% spoiler free, these are our thoughts about Old. You want to go first, Kyle, or you want me to?
I'll go first.
Do it.
I wanted to like this movie because I am pro M. Night Shyamalan. Just because he knows how to make a good movie, and like I was saying before, he is a unique director, and I like some of his uniqueness when he hits the mark, he hits the mark.
Mm-hmm.
This movie did not hit the mark for me. I was going in open-minded. I was going in ready to be impressed, ready to see the next M. Night Shyamalan movie, knowing his history, the baggage that all brought in. And I don't know if I don't think he did a very good job writing this movie.
Sure.
There's the concept, which is interesting. Then there's also shocks and scares, which don't seem to serve the concept. Like, they fit in with the concept, but they just seem more to be there to be like, what can I do and show? And then I don't know. We can talk more about it, but I found the acting to be kind of wooden, and those are good actors who you just listed off. So I gotta say, it must not be them. It must be the directing and the writing. And M. Night Shyamalan's the director and the writer of this movie, so I gotta put the fault on him.
I agree. This might be a very boring review when we get into more details because I generally have the exact same thoughts. I thought the acting was absolutely brutal, and I think the acting started at the writing. I think great actors maybe can save their lines, but when all the lines are written badly, that's a hard hill to climb for sure. And the writing was absolutely brutal in this, and
yes, it was.
The acting followed suit, and the high concept maybe can limp you through some of those things, but even the treatment of the high concept felt overwritten for me. And unfortunately, that all combined for a pretty awful movie.
Awful. Wow.
And one that I think had potential and showed potential to turn things around over the course of the movie. And at every opportunity, wrong decisions were made, unfortunately. Yeah. And so did not like it. Do we want to give star ratings?
Yeah, let's do quick star rating. Then we'll do our trailer spoilers. And then we'll do our full-on spoilers, right?
Trailer level spoilers, sure.
Followed by an actual like spoiler section.
Yep. I gave this
great.
1.5.
Oh, well, I liked it a half star more than you. 2 stars.
All right. A 1.5 and a 2 stars for Old. If you just wanted to know whether we liked it or not, there you go. From here on out, we're going to talk about the movie a little bit more in depth, but still keep it as spoiler free as you're used to from us. Like nothing that wasn't shown in the trailer. We're not going to talk about anything that wasn't shown in the trailer. But if you continue to listen, you will at least know the premise that we're talking about.
I would like to know if there's any listener, and maybe they stopped listening already, who is totally cold, just listened to our 30-second review and rating and is still going to see this movie. So if you're one of those people, please write in. Or are at this point people like, well, I'm not going to see it, so might as well just blow through all the spoilers and everything anyway.
That could be. I don't know. Sometimes when people have strong negative reactions to something that's relatively high profile, I actually want to see it. It makes me want to see it more. I mean, I do stand by that if you do want to see it, you probably shouldn't listen on. Unless you already have seen the trailer and you know the basics of the movie. But if you still don't know the basics of the movie and you want to see it because we hated it, or you want to see it because you wanted to see it anyway, probably come back to this. Because your best shot at liking it is to have the most surprise left, I would say.
I wouldn't say I hated this movie.
I disliked it.
It was a strong dislike.
Over the course of the movie, I started to act. It was daring me to dislike it more and more. And it did.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's jump into it. This is the official IMDb plot synopsis. A family on a tropical holiday discovers that the secluded beach where they are relaxing for a few hours is somehow causing them to age rapidly, reducing their entire lives into a single day. So that's the high concept. These people, they get taken to a beach, they're dropped off at a beach, they're on the beach, and they realize over the course of, a couple hours of being on the beach that they're aging rapidly. And so the rest of the movie is like, how do they figure this out? What's their reaction once they figure it out? Why didn't they just leave the beach at that point? Those types of questions are what's being answered.
Can we say that they're at the beach by choice?
Oh yeah, they went there.
Okay, yeah, they went there. So it's not like they woke up on this beach. They went to this beach. Yeah,
they went to this beach to spend a day at the beach, and then over the course of it, things started happening. Odd things. They realized they were aging.
Rapid aging started happening. Yeah,
rapid aging. So, what did you think of Old?
So. It's an interesting concept, right? Like what happens if you're somewhere and all of a sudden your aging just gets super accelerated. And how do we deal with that? Knowing that you got the clock ticking. There's also this whole idea of, if your life is compressed into a day, what does that now mean? Like for you and, think about on the life you've lived and life you have left. And I think those are interesting concepts. But I think M. Night Shyamalan was more interested in being like, all right, people are going to age in a day and die quickly. How can I show gruesome death?
Yeah.
That's what he seemed to get out of this story. I know it's based on something. It's an adapted story. It's based on a short story or a comic book. And I don't know the themes of the book versus the movie. So maybe the comic book has kind of the same idea. But definitely... in this, it seemed like the concept was in service of M. Night Shyamalan trying to give us PG-13 horror. And I found the horror to be rather benign, not terribly interesting. Like it was maybe kind of gross at points, but nothing, not shocking. It's nothing original besides like, oh, isn't that kind of gruesome? Yeah. So I don't know. I just think there's an interesting story, interesting concept, and Shyamalan decided to focus more on the gross parts of the story. And I mean, maybe where I'm talking more of like a French 1960s think piece here instead of like a thriller movie, but I didn't care for that. We talked about the acting, and it's just it's bad. The line reading is bad from good actors. And the other thing that really bothered me is there. So you got like these kids who start like they're like 6 years old, 10 years old when they start on the beach. And, you know, halfway through the movie, now they're teenagers or young adults, but at least physically looking, but mentally they're still supposed to be 6 and 10. Right. So these now 20-year-old actors are trying to act like a 6-year-old in a 17-year-old's body. And the choices some of the actors made of trying to act young was just weird. Like Alex Wolff, who he's in Hereditary, Jumanji, like he's obviously Hereditary was like a lot of heavy lifting from an actor. So he obviously knows how to act. But watching him trying to act like a 6-year-old I just came across as odd.
Sure.
And like same for Thomasin McKenzie. Sometimes hers was inconsistent. Sometimes she was acting like a 10-year-old. Another time she was acting like her actual actor age, which is probably mid-20s, early 20s. So I don't know. I just found that hard to latch onto. There's more, but I don't want to get into spoilery yet. So what do you want to add to my thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with this movie is that from the get-go, from the first scene when they are like driving to the resort that they're going to, it plays. First of all, the movie felt cheap from that point on. It felt like no movie that I've seen in a movie theater, which I haven't seen many in the last year and a half, has screamed at me, this should be streaming. This should not be on a movie screen right now. Like this movie is not worthy of going to see it at a movie theater. I mean, it just felt like a streaming title, like a straight to Netflix movie from frame one. It felt like that. And then, unfortunately, you have these two great actors in what's her name? Vicky Creeps, I think is how you pronounce her name. I think
so, yeah. Is she French or German?
I think she's German, but I don't know exactly.
That's fine, yeah.
But yeah, we've recently seen her. She was opposite. She was in Phantom Thread. She was opposite. What's his name in Phantom Thread?
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yeah, Daniel Day-Lewis.
But was she the muse, or was she like the third woman in the house?
I think she's the assistant.
Yes, but
I don't know.
Okay,
sure.
I'll have to go back and look. Yeah,
but all the people in Phantom Thread were excellent.
Yeah, right.
That's my point. She can act.
Yeah, same for Gail Garcia Bernal. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Two great actors. The kids are brutal. I mean, they are absolutely awful. I don't blame children for being awful.
The little kids.
The actual kid. The children in the opening of the film, I would say. Actually, like the first third of the movie. They are just, every time they're given a line, I think M. Night thought they were coming off as precocious. And to me, they were coming off as absolutely unrealistic. Like kids would not say things like this. They wouldn't say things this way. They don't act this way. Even precocious kids don't act this way. And none of it felt genuine. All of it felt like somebody gave them a line to say and they said it and then they moved on without actually giving them a situation where they could say something natural to the camera and it would feel natural. It very much felt like somebody gave them a line and then they memorized that line and they repeated it. and not much care was taken to making these kids comfortable with saying the line or giving them the room to say something similar to the line that made them feel comfortable. And so you see movies with good kid acting, and those are the ones that have made the kids comfortable enough. Like Goonies is not an acting exercise, certainly, but you believe those kids are in that situation because they're talking to each other like kids talk to each other. And a lot of those lines aren't in the script because Dick Donner knew that they were kids and knew that there's no reason why they need to say the lines word for word, because you're just going to make them self-conscious and they're not going to act natural. They're not going to believe their friends that are just talking or insulting each other or having fun or whatever they were in that movie in any given point in time. And then in this movie, it's very obvious that these are kids reading lines to a camera. Like super obvious. And on top of that, they're bad lines.
Yeah.
So you're going to force these kids to read bad lines badly. And it just bothered me from frame one. And then you realize, oh, it's not just the kids that are reading bad lines. All the adults are not acting normal either. Like there's an early fight scene between the married couple with Vicky and Gail where they're arguing, and they're not arguing like humans argue. They're arguing like screenwriters who have never really had an argument would argue on paper. And they're leaving out specific details and adding in other details that would not be in an argument. And you combine that with the fact that everything they're saying feels artificial, and you feel like all the dialogue is just like plot delivery.
Yep.
And that would be fine if the format of what comes later makes sense, right? Like if you get the feeling that everybody's acting oddly, then you can roll with that. If the plot later supports the idea that all of these people are speaking oddly. Like this isn't a spoiler, but earlier on, or very early in the movie, like they get there, they get to the resort, and this woman who works for the resort says something to them and gives them a drink and says, based on your preferences, we made a drink for you. But she says it in like this really odd way, right? Like a way that's a little too enthusiastic and a little too like why would you even say that? Wouldn't you just give them the drink?
Yeah, like why do you say like based on your social media profile we made you this drink or something? It's some line like that,
right? But you can forgive it because later on in the movie, it kind of makes sense as to why she would give more specifics than what she needs to. I don't think she would in real life, but in a weird Twilight Zone world, maybe somebody would give more data to the person in that moment. Then, right after that line, the couple who are supposedly real people, I'm using air quotes for those of you not watching YouTube. The woman says, yeah, and can you believe I found this place online? And it's just such a weird thing. Everybody finds everything online. Where else would you like what? There's no reason for this line to be there. And then later, like that line is, I guess, tried to be supported. It just doesn't make sense coming from the real person in the situation, from the quote unquote person who's entering a situation that they don't understand what's going on around them. You know what I mean? Like the bigger machinery of what's going on around them. And so, it just, those are just two very early examples of things, a pattern that happens over and over and over through the movie. And it was very brutal to watch. To watch somebody who I know can be a master of subtlety, like M. Night is with Sixth Sense, how he is with Unbreakable, how he is with portions of The Village. And it feels like he's just lost the ability to be subtle in any way, shape, or form. When it comes to these high concept thriller movies. He just needs to be done with them because he cannot do them anymore. It's become very clear to me.
No, and every line of dialogue in this movie feels like exposition. Like she has to say, "Can't you believe I found this place online?" Because there is a payoff for it later, but it's so clunky. Everyone in the movie states their job. Like it's very important, and in fact, like the 6-year-old kid, the precocious one, he literally walks up to people and says, "Hi, what's your name and what do you do?" Like that's his cute little quirk, but it's just because. It's for whatever reason to Shyamalan, it's very important that we all know what every person does as a job. And like when adults meet each other, they like shake hands and say, "Hi, my name is blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's not like, "Oh, what do you do?" They just introduce themselves with name and occupation. And like, that's fine. Like you want to know who's a doctor, who's a nurse, who's a psychologist. Great. But there's so much more elegant ways of doing it.
For sure.
Like even the psychologist, you notice like every time things go weird, she just like screams, "We should all talk about this." And like, why? Like, are you trying to make commentary on psychologists, or I don't understand.
Yeah,
I don't know.
it was brutal. It was like hitting you over the head that this is important. And then when some of those things come back around, you're like, yeah, but you told us it was important a million times, so it's no longer clever. You know what I mean? Like there's just no balance between it's important, but we rolled by it, and then later on, you can see the importance. It's like we hit you over the head so many times that by the time we've revealed why it's important, you don't care anymore because of course it's important. You've told us that like a million times. Now you're just connecting the dots because you have to finish the puzzle, not because the puzzle is interesting any longer to us. And I think probably where this movie goes the most wrong for me, beyond just the painful experience of like being told over and over and over things that don't really matter, is that he never got to a place where there was a bigger point to all of this. Like there's a little bit at the end that is decent, but when you have the best of high concept movies, the ones that are worthy of standing the test of time are ones that can use that high concept to teach you something, make you think about your own life or whatever, just something. Take the high concept, put more meat on its bones than what is at the surface. And this movie is maybe trying to do that. It's just failing at every step until the very end. I would say there's like a scene at the end that's decent. It's like 30 seconds out of a 2-hour movie where they kind of come around and redeem bits of these characters. But it takes so long to get there. And there's just so much of the movie that does not do that. And they really only do it for three or four characters out of a bunch. And I was just like, what a waste. Because like, again, to go back to The Sixth Sense or Unbreakable or even The Visit or the Village. The Village. I feel like those are high concept movies that have something to say and they execute it relatively well. A lot of people don't like The Village, but I like The Village. I like the execution of even like the bigger idea of The Village. But certainly in Unbreakable and Sixth Sense, most people can agree that there's like some kind of lesson, I don't know what you would call it, bigger thing at play than just the concept of the movie. And I feel like there's a lot to be had in the high concept structure of old. And it's all just wasted on weird tracking shots and horrible dialogue.
there was one shot where Gail Garcia Bernal was talking to the doctor, Richard Sewell or something, the British doctor.
Yep.
And like on the extreme left is half of Gail Garcia Bernal's face and profile. And then in the lower right-hand corner was the doctor's face. And then it was just like beach and ocean between them. And I was like, did he screw up this shot? Like, were people off their marks and he kept it? Or are we actually trying to show like 3/4 of our actual actors' faces and then just a bunch of like, it wasn't even like a beauty shot of the water because it was kind of looking down like at the water. I'm like, what is this shot? Like it was so weird that it stuck out like a sore thumb to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that or not, but I was waiting for like someone to step into frame, but they both stood like just out of frame with like just part of their faces showing. And then you're looking at mundane water below them. And I just did not know what was going on there.
Oh, I noticed it. Throughout the movie, there's many moments where the focus is odd and the tracking shots are weird. Yeah, it's a strangely presented movie, I would say. Which is fine. Like I like weird experiments if they make sense. It's just it all felt so cheap and wrongly formulated from the script that it was hard for any of that artistic experimentation to work for me, for sure. I watched a GQ, I think it's GQ, might be Vogue, whichever YouTube series that does like directors break down a scene from their movie. I forget who that is. But they did one with M. Night for Old. And I mean, he's a guy that just absolutely, like, he broke down the scene and he listed all the influences for the weirdness of the shots and the different things he was trying in this movie that he had never done before, but he had seen done, in Hitchcock movies and all these other movies. And everything he described, absolutely he tried, right? Like I could see that this was not shoddily put together with no thought.
No.
And also, if you had read what he said, you might think this is the most pretentious mother trucker you've ever heard in your life.
Well, that's not surprised me at all.
But M. Night, as he talks to you via this YouTube channel, this YouTube video, doesn't come off as that. Like, he literally believes that's what he pulled off. You know what I mean? Like, his personality and the way he perceives himself and his work is that he pulled this off. And so it's not pretentious when delivered by him, because you can actually tell, like, he wasn't doing it to be pretentious. He was doing it because it's what he was aiming to do. You know what I mean? Type of thing. So it's confusing. And you started off like this discussion with, like, you wanted to like it and you like M. Night, and I do too. I agree. I want to see him make good movies. I don't mind if he makes stinkers every now and then. It's just been a lot of not great movies for me. I know a lot of people like Split. We'll get to that, but
we'll get to that. Yeah.
Just not a lot of great movies, especially the high concept ones. There's really only one past The Village that has worked for me. So with this one, I just felt like the concept was there, and it's just a lot of over execution to something that should be fairly simple, and a lot of focus on stuff that doesn't really matter, when really what matters is the bigger concept at large here, and like nailing you caring about these people. And then when they actually learn something in the end, having you care about the fact that they learned it. But he couldn't get me there for sure.
Yeah. I think if I was to have a final summation in this section, I would say that you've got this interesting concept that is used in service of gross PG-13 horror.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's that seemed to be more the vehicle. He had this idea of, like, what are some gross, unique deaths I can show on screen? Okay, now how do I do that? Oh, let's use this concept of people aging rapidly.
Yeah, and there was literally zero suspense. I had zero suspenseful moments in this movie.
No, there was no tension. Like there was one moment when they're in a cave with a match, which was supposed to.
Oh, I do. Yeah, and somebody's yelling at them to blow out the match.
Right,
yeah, okay.
Right, and you could tell that that's supposed to be the tense scene. And by this point, you know that every scene is just a way to kill a character off in a gruesome way. So at that point, you're like, well, someone's going to die here. Like, there's no tension. And it's most likely going to be this person, because we already kind of figured out who's going to die and who's going to live.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. I can't wait to get the spoiler. There is something wild that happens in the middle of this movie
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of in the trailer, but I don't want to get into it.
Sure.
And then it's just never addressed for the rest of the movie.
Yeah.
And that was the moment where I was like, okay, this might be a bad movie. Like I was recognizing bad things were happening, but like it could, like the ship could right itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then this something wild happens, and yeah, I'm like, nope, okay, this is held it for me. But
Yeah.
we'll get into that in the next section, or the spoiler section.
Definitely. Anything else spoiler free before we jump into spoilers? I think I'm pretty much spent on not talking details, because there are a lot of details.
I concur. Yep, I'm ready to talk details when you are.
The details don't really matter in the end, because he didn't loop it around for me. He didn't make me care, unfortunately. But that started before we even got into the concept. Like the moment I lived through 15 minutes of his dialogue delivered by great actors and children, all equally bad, I was just like, I don't know what I'm watching here. Hopefully this bad dialogue is a part of the story. And then it wasn't. It continued.
It had nothing to do with it, just bad dialogue.
I know. I was like, okay, I'm actively not enjoying this. And more like, I'm actively disappointed in this.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of potential here, and it's all wasted.
I never hated the film. I was never like waiting for it to be over.
Mm-hmm.
But I think disappointment is the best word.
Yeah.
Just because I think you and I have very similar thoughts on Shyamalan, and I bet you our lists and our opinions on his movies will probably be very similar too.
Right. All right. That's it for the spoiler-free section. The spoiler chat will be at the end of the episode, so listen after the episode ends. Once the music is over, you'll hear us come back, and we'll talk open and freely about the rest of the movie. All right, let's talk the films of M. Night Shyamalan. We're going to skip the first two because, as Kyle and I learned recently, The Sixth Sense is not M. Night Shyamalan's first movie.
It is not his first movie. That was a surprise to me.
He had two before that. He made Praying with Anger in 1992, which, from what I understand, is a student film. That's like rarely seen.
Yeah, it has like 400 votes on IMDb.
Right. And then in 1998, he made a studio film titled Wide Awake with Miramax that actually had some pretty well-known people in it.
Yeah, I read a quick article about this beforehand. Rosie O'Donnell was in it, and she really liked the movie. And Harvey Weinstein, Miramax, right, financed it. And apparently when Harvey Weinstein got the movie, he ordered a bunch of like reshoots and re-edits and like kind of chopped the whole movie up. And Shyamalan was pretty bothered by this and went to Rosie O'Donnell and said, "Hey, could you help me confront Harvey Weinstein about this being my movie?"
Mm-hmm.
So Rosie O'Donnell and M. Night went to Harvey Weinstein, and basically Rosie O'Donnell said, like, M. Night Shyamalan is a visionary. Like, this guy's an artist. He's going places. Don't mess with his movie. And Harvey Weinstein reacted in a, as we now know, very Harvey Weinstein manner to it, and pretty much buried this movie because, like, as we learned, if you crossed him in the 90s and 2000s, he would retaliate by sinking your movie.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't know what would happen to M. Night Shyamalan's career if Wide Awake was seen. Would he have made The Sixth Sense? Would he have been a different trajectory? Who knows? But yeah, this was definitely a purposely sunken movie because Weinstein's ego got bruised.
Yeah, and I'm seeing now that Julia Stiles is in this movie, so
yeah,
I might
that's
have
right.
to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, let me know if it's a good movie, and like, would this have been not his Sixth Sense, but would this have been his career launcher?
Oh, who cares? Julia Stiles is in it. I don't care if it's total garbage.
I mean,
I'm watching it.
If Charlize was in it, I'd check it out, but Stiles is not enough to bring me to the game.
Sure. All right. So after 1998's Wide Awake, he made 1999's The Sixth Sense.
Yep.
Which is, I believe, what most people know him for the most part. There's obviously some movies that are fairly high profile that come later, but it's the one that everybody learned the name M. Night Shyamalan on. And Sixth Sense is great. I love Sixth Sense. I forget where it is on my top 500, but it's got to be fairly high. I should probably look that up. Let me see. Ooh.
Yeah, it's definitely on my top 500, but I can't tell you where exactly.
Right. I think it might actually be in my top 100 now that
really?
I think about it.
A top 100 movie, Sixth Sense.
It's pretty high. I like it quite a bit. It's not in my top 100.
Okay. Sixth Sense is a movie that I think works 2 or 3 times. And then after that, unless you really love it, you don't need to come back to it a lot. Because like there is, I mean, can we spoil the Sixth Sense is 20 years old?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Right. So like there's a twist, and the twist we find out is that Bruce Willis is actually a ghost the whole movie. Right. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those movies where once you learn that, you're like, oh, you can go back, you can watch it again, and you can look for the clues and the signs and the visual language that M. Night Shyamalan uses to tip you off to what's really going on. And it's a movie that, like, once you know the twist, it works. You can't pick it apart. You can actually say, oh, wow, this actually works. Mm-hmm. But beyond a third or fourth time, unless you really love this movie, I don't know if I need to see it like over and over and over again.
Sure. I mean, that being said, I think I've seen it 5 or 6 times.
Okay.
I like it. I like it enough, and I respect the trick of the movie.
Yeah.
Enough to have enjoyed it. I mean, it's been a long time. It's been
a long time.
10 years plus since I've seen it. But there was a time that I was totally open to repeat visits. It is on my top 400.
Okay.
It's number 384.
Nice.
So it's barely in my top 100, but it is there.
It is the first DVD I ever watched.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah. We got a DVD player in 99. We rented it. And then we watched every single special feature.
That's a fun fact for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But it was cool, like special features. And I just remember, like, we finished the movie and then everything that was on there, we just watched them all because it was new and novel.
Yeah. I mean, I know it's super easy to be cynical about the twist, the reveal, the flashback of like, oh, here's all the hints I gave you. You know, that kind of happens at the end of the movie.
Is there a flashback as the reveal's happening?
Yeah. Where they're like,
It's
where
been
they're
a while.
like, this happened and this happened and this happened and you didn't catch it.
Oh, yeah.
But the guy's been dead the whole time. You know what I mean? And we gave you opportunities to see it. But we didn't actually say it in the way that we shot the movie and the way we presented it. That's your clue as to the fact that he was dead. The fact that like nobody alive shares dialogue with him. Only the kid shares dialogue with him. And you're told pretty early that the kid can talk to dead people. So all the clues are there. They're just subtle enough to not be enough to tip you off. And they're also not so subtle that you couldn't have picked up on it the first time. You know what I mean? Like it hits this perfect balance of like, we didn't leave you clueless, but we also didn't give you enough clues to figure it out. That by the end of it, I think the reason why most people who saw that movie once and enjoyed it and moved on are because they didn't feel stupid. You know what I mean? For not understanding it. And they also didn't figure it out on their own. And that's like a really hard balance to hit. And M. Night, seemingly to most people, hit it out of the park on his first movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you know
for sure.
Like he pulled a Hitchcock on his first movie. And I think that's why people freaked out about it at the time. And
his third movie, actually, but
that's what I mean. But to most to the viewing public, to somebody who follows movies, I didn't even know he had 2 until recently.
Right. The fact that his first is a student film and his second was buried, M. Night Shyamalan was not a household name at this point whatsoever.
And I remember the legend of M. Night being that he wrote movies before The Sixth Sense. and he wrote the Stuart Little movie.
Oh yeah.
And then he moved. This was like the first one he got to make on his own. And it happened to be The Sixth Sense, like this blockbuster movie. Like that was the lore around him, which obviously wasn't the case. But I still think the movie works. Again, it's been a decade, but I'm assuming it would still work as well as it did a decade on me. Obviously, the twist doesn't work on me anymore, but my appreciation for how the execution of the twist was pulled off would hold up. But yeah.
I watched 12 Monkeys last night, and Bruce Willis has a line in 12 Monkeys, and he says something like, "I see dead people everywhere."
What inspired you to watch 12 Monkeys out of nowhere?
Oh, okay. So the quick tangent. We had some of my wife's family was in town, including her cousins who are in their 20s. They actually went to go see Old with me. And last night, their last night here, and like we were just talking, and for some reason Bruce Willis came up. And like we were talking Bruce Willis movies, and her cousins were like, "Oh yeah, I've never seen 12 Monkeys." And then I told them, like, "That's funny. I just bought the 12 Monkeys Steelbook like 2 weeks ago. You guys want to watch it?" And they're like, "Sure, why not?" So like at 9 o'clock at night, we popped in the 12 Monkeys.
Wow. Did they like it? It's a weird movie.
They liked it. Yeah. I mean, it's like, so this movie came out after before they were born.
Right.
So they weren't really familiar with it. They're surprised Brad Pitt was in it. And yeah, they liked it. It's a weird movie. They dug it though. They kind of liked the twist, the explanation at the end with the whole airport stuff. They thought it was kind of mind twisty in that sense.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Absolutely.
They pointed out something to me that I totally forgot. Like, they had fresh eyes and like, oh yeah, I never noticed that before. So yeah, no, they enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed watching it again. And that Blu-ray Steelbook looks pretty good. It was pretty good scan.
The virus wiping out the planet is a little more prescient today than it was when they released it.
Oh yeah, they asked me like, "What's this movie about?" I'm like, "Well, there is a virus that wiped out the planet, and Bruce Willis travels back in time to figure out what caused the virus." And like,
right.
Oh, I'm like, but it's weird. It's not.
It's less about the virus and more about being weird.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it was fun to watch. It is fun to watch with young people to get their opinion on it.
Sure. Yeah, I enjoy that one as well. I mean, Bruce Willis was kind of on a hot streak around this time of just kind of picking weird directors and picking his projects well, I would say.
I think that's why it came up. Like we were talking about actors, and I mentioned something like, because Letterboxd does stats, and how like Bruce Willis is my 5th most watched actor. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, like how is he? Like Matt Damon, Samuel L. Jackson, Brad Pitt makes sense. Tom Hanks makes sense. How is Bruce Willis number 5? And then we started listing out Bruce Willis movies, and we're like, oh, okay, that's how it works out. But it's like one of these weird, like everyone has seen him in the movie, but I feel like in the last decade we really just don't talk about Bruce Willis anymore.
Yeah, because the only thing notable he's been in are like G.I. Joe movies and Die Hard,
like Die Hard
that nobody cares about.
Yeah,
and like crappy direct-to-video titles.
Yeah, like Death Wish knockoffs or actual Death Wish. So yeah, no, but right, definitely in like 80s, 90s, 2000s, Bruce Willis was the guy. He was a star.
Yep, definitely. All right, after The Sixth Sense, a year later, M. Night releases Unbreakable. It's a movie about a comic book hero and supervillain, but kind of set in as realistic a world as you can set a comic book movie in. So you got Bruce Willis playing this guy who can't get sick, can't get hurt, is pretty much impenetrable and invincible.
He's unbreakable.
He doesn't know it at the beginning of the movie. Over the course of the movie, he realizes that that's the case. And then, of course, there's got to be a yin to a yang. And so Samuel L. Jackson plays Mr. Glass, who ever since he was a child has been very susceptible to disease or getting hurt. He literally has like fragile bones and is wheelchair bound. And so he is trying to exact his revenge on the world because he's lived such a painful life so far. So it's a comic book, hero / villain framing for like a realistic, like what if people had superpowers or what's the opposite of superpowers? Super vulnerabilities.
Right. Yeah. I feel like Samuel L. Jackson's character has a normal medical condition.
Sure.
But he's
just reacting in a villainous way to that.
Right.
Medical condition.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah. So, and if you're going to have cells that are negative, like literally the cells of Samuel L. Jackson's body are portraying themselves in every negative way, that it's logical in this universe that there's the opposite, one that cannot be susceptible to anything.
Yep.
Which I find an interesting concept, and I think Unbreakable is relatively well received. I think most people enjoy it on some level or another.
Yep. There was a time when this was my favorite Shyamalan movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's been so long since I've seen it, it slipped a little bit. This is a movie where when it came out, it was primed for a sequel this came out like 2000, 2001.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
I think it was primed for a sequel back in the 2000s. We did eventually get a sequel to this movie, which I did not see, but I'm guessing that too much time passed for that sequel to really land or to be meaningful.
Yeah. We will get there, but I don't
Okay.
I don't disagree with that statement that they should have done it much quicker than they did.
Right, because the reveal that Samuel L. Jackson is the villain, kind of the yin to Bruce Willis's yang, is not really towards the end. It's like
Right.
it's mostly Bruce Willis realizing he has powers. I even think isn't Samuel L. Jackson his friend or his confidant through most of the movie.
Yeah, they cross paths.
They cross paths, okay.
Sure.
And then at the end, you kind of find out like, oh no, there's this real hero villain dynamic going on. So it's a great origin story movie that was ready for like the next chapter, and it just waited too long for the next chapter.
Yeah, it's the type of movie that you either do a sequel within the next 3 or 4 years, or you never do a sequel. And
Yeah,
they chose option 3.
which is wait 20 years and do a sequel.
Wait too long and then do it.
Yeah.
Okay. 2002, he does Signs with Mel Gibson. This is a alien invasion movie, and it's like a farmer and his family surviving an alien invasion. It's probably his most straightforward movie because there's a twist in Signs, but it's not the bulk of the movie, I would say.
Yeah.
And the bulk is living with this family and having the unknown happen to them and like where things go from there. And actually, it's not even where things go from there. It's like the anticipation of something that's about to happen. And then when it happens, twist, movie over. Even
Right,
if the twist is like not telegraphed at all and is just kind of like coincidence. I don't know if it's coincidence, but
so
accidental.
The twist is the only thing that defeats the aliens is water.
Sure.
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't going to spoil it, but
Oh, I'm going to spoil it because they invade a planet that is 70% water. Like, I don't know. I think it's kind of telegraphed just because you got the kid leaving water glasses all over the house.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't pick up on it the first time I watched it. It's very
True.
obvious the second time, but the first time I wasn't like, oh, they're leaving water around because that's going to come into play.
That's true.
I don't think it's a strong enough hint.
Okay, so I remember this movie having very strong religious themes, like specific Christian themes.
Mm-hmm.
Like Mel Gibson, he plays a pastor, correct?
Yes.
And he, at the beginning of the movie, he's having a crisis of faith.
Mm-hmm.
and he's almost like rejecting God because of something that happened to him at the beginning of the movie. And like you see silhouettes of crosses on the wall where he took him down. And I think he talks about God or the absence of God with his children.
Mm-hmm.
But then like once the alien invasion starts and the water glasses happen, then that's like his epiphany of like, oh no, God has a plan, or everything's falling into place, and he finds his faith. Maybe I'm going to too much of this movie.
Sure.
But these are kind of the things that I took from it. And also an early Joaquin Phoenix role. I mean, I know he had also done Gladiator at this point, but it's interesting to see him go from like playing, Commodus, a Caesar in Gladiator, to playing like a minor league baseball player burnout.
Sure. In right around the same time too.
Yeah, well, within a year or two.
Yeah. But I enjoy Signs like as kind of like a one-off little alien movie.
Mm-hmm. M. Night Shyamalan has a significant role in my wife and I's relationship because I met her in the early 2000s and we started dating in the 2000s.
So you watched a bunch of these movies together?
We watched a bunch of them together. So,
Sure.
like, I think another reason I wanted to like old, just because, like, I think of his movies and I think of being on a date with my wife,
Sure.
or my future wife at that point. So even if I don't like all these movies, they bring back overall positive experiences.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting that his next movie, The Village, is the last one that he made with Buena Vista Pictures. And it's also in that sequence of 4 that he started out with that I would consider good movies.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. I like The Village.
Me too.
I know a lot of people say The Village is the first bad one and it's the start of the decline. And like, I agree, Village is not as good as Unbreakable or Sixth Sense. I think it's better than Signs, in my opinion. And it's beautiful. Like, this movie was shot by Roger Deakins. It is one of his best looking movies. Like, his use of color is amazing. His use of the woods. There is a twist. I don't know if I'm going to keep going into the spoilers or not. And it's a twist where when you think about it, it seems a little far-fetched.
Mm-hmm.
Or of like, is this really the direction we want to take? But I do think the movie does a really good job of keeping you on edge and keeping things weird enough where something's going on, but you're not quite sure where it's going. It's not a twist that I guessed whatsoever.
Yeah, it's not a twist, I guess. I mean, out of these 4, I didn't guess the twist on any of them. Unbreakable doesn't have a true twist, but with the other 3, I didn't really guess the twist, nor was I engaged in trying to guess the twist in any of them. With The Village, I think when you watch it again, like on rewatch, I think there's some pretty strong clues that I think the balance is off compared to The Sixth Sense as far as like how many clues versus, that precious balance it is off a little bit. But I think the ambiance, the acting itself, the writing, I think is very certainly solid compared to old. That's for darn sure. But it's well done. And so even if you don't buy some of the more fantastical elements of what's going on in the end, some of the logic leaps or like coincidental stuff, maybe not coincidental. Whatever.
Yeah, but it's not fantastical. It's not supernatural.
Right.
Yeah.
If you don't buy the premise, if you don't believe the premise could actually be executed, then the movie's not going to go there for you. But
no,
if you kind of sink into some of those other elements of the movie, I think it's pretty solid.
Yeah, no, I agree.
After The Village, he made Lady in the Water. I think a lot of people started to give up on him with this one.
Yeah, this is the first one where I remember being like, "Ooh, this is again saw with my wife," and we were like, or girlfriend at the time, wife now, and we were both kind of like, "Is this like a bad movie?" I think.
Sure.
This has some of his clunky writing in it, where there's just a lot of exposition dialogue, and it does not come across natural, and there are there are people like Old who are not acting like people.
Right. I feel though in Lady in the Water, it's silly.
Uh-huh.
But it makes sense in the end. And like the whole movie is constructed to have all these people acting in very specific odd ways.
Yes.
So that a very specific thing can happen in the end. And like all the puzzle pieces, you might not like them, but they all exist for the reason of serving the end of the movie.
So
I enjoyed
yeah.
that aspect of it, even if not all of it hits at 100%.
I see what you're saying. And I guess my counter to that is I felt it all very heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, I felt like I was just watching like the gears turn. Like I was no longer seeing the magic. I was just watching the sausage being made to arrive to a specific point. And yes, all movies arrive to a point. Like that's the point of a story. But a good story keeps you engaged in that. And you don't quite always know that you're moving towards a specific spot. And in this movie, it was just like,
it's very blatant.
Right. It's like seeing the Matrix code. I can see all the ones and zeros in front of me. I know where we're going.
That's kind of what Old does as well.
Yeah. I feel like Lady in the Water and Old are very much in the same spectrum of M. Night Shyamalan movie.
I wonder why it doesn't bother me in Lady in the Water. Maybe because it's already starting from like, you know, the title of the story is Lady in the Water, and it's like, oh, there's a mermaid in the water or something like that. And so it's like from frame one, it's like, okay, we're going to forgive this for not being real.
And you're kind of told it's a fairy tale anyway, right?
Yeah,
like, is it framed like that?
I believe so. I remember when he was doing press for this, he was making a really big deal about how his kids wrote the story. Like he literally had the kids make up a story and then he wrote a script around it.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just a little too much, I think, for a lot of people too, when they watched the movie to be like, it sucks because a kid wrote it. It might be your kid, you might be proud of them, but that doesn't mean you make a $50 million movie around their dumb story.
Around their dumb idea with these rather scary beasts too, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah. I'm sure that was his invention and less his kids, but
right, because he's got to do something weird.
Right. All right.
We didn't mention The Village has beasts in it too.
Right.
Right. Like besides Unbreakable, so far every movie we've talked about has ghost, alien, or beast.
Yeah, it's a theme for sure.
For sure.
In 2008, he makes The Happening, which I think if people weren't already frustrated with him, this was kind of the nail in the coffin with him with these kind of high concept movies. So in The Happening, it's like some kind of weird mystical thing happens and people are infected by this thought that they should commit suicide. And so people commit suicide in mass.
Can I say what's causing them to commit suicide?
Sure.
It's the trees.
The trees, yeah.
It's like an ecological disaster. Like the trees have evolved to wipe out mankind.
Mind control people because
we're committing suicide. And this is another movie where, again, interesting idea. Like, you can talk about the planet trying to adjust to humans to eradicate us to save itself, right? That's not an uncommon theme, especially in 2021. But this just felt, again, like we have a concept, but I want to use it to show gruesome deaths and not talk about ecological disaster or human impact or nature revolting. I just want to show like cops shooting themselves and people jumping off buildings. And
you're going to include that. You're just going to include it at the most surface level you can.
Yeah.
To frame all this other like weirdness.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's the first movie too where I was like, oh, M. Night isn't writing in the same way that he used to write. Like I used to believe his characters actually would say the things that they were saying in the movies. And this was the first one where I was like, this feels written by somebody who doesn't know how humans speak to each other.
So when Megan and I walked out of Lady in the Water, our conversation was that a bad movie? And we talked about it. And The Happening, about a third of the way through, I remember turning to her and saying, this is a bad movie. She was like, oh yeah. Like, and this was the movie I gave up on M. Night Shyamalan after this movie. Okay. And I took a break for a while. So I think these next couple ones, it's all you. I jumped back in, but this is the kind of one I was like, I'm done. Casting Marky Mark as a science teacher was a bridge too far.
I hear you. Well, in 2010, he made a movie that has no twists and doesn't have any heavy lifting in the acting department. Has a lot of heavy lifting in like the CG department, which I would say certainly his earlier movies have some CG, but it's mostly like I don't know what you'd call it. It's not heavy CG. It's more just like
it's
filling
background
filling
CG.
reason. Right, yeah, for sure. So in 2010, he makes The Last Airbender, which is an adaptation of a Nickelodeon cartoon that
a much loved Nickelodeon cartoon.
Right. Yeah, with a really strong fan base. And he made this movie and people didn't like it at all.
That's an understatement.
I would say fans of the series actively despise it.
Yep.
And fans of M. Night were ready to not like it. I would say they were already most people were already souring on M. Night. So if they went to go see this and they had no context for The Last Airbender, then I think they didn't get much out of it. This is the one M. Night Shyamalan film since The Sixth Sense, since he's become a well-known director, that I had not seen until just a few days ago. And
wow.
I watched it. I watched it with an open mind, and I don't understand the hate. Let me preface that with, I've never seen a single episode of The Last Airbender. I knew nothing about The Last Airbender. I don't know what it should be. All I know is M. Night's movie of The Last Airbender. So if I'm speaking well of a thing that you absolutely hate because you're a big Airbender fan, I don't get it because I have no context for it. All I know is what this movie gave me. And what this movie gave me made complete sense to me. Like the Airbenders, the theory, the plot behind the Airbenders, the characters that represented the Airbenders, they all made sense to me. And it was kind of a fun watch. Like I enjoyed learning about airbending and learning about people's powers and why they're important and how these factions were fighting against each other. And I couldn't tell you which character was wrong because I have no reference for it. And the way the characters were presented, like their distinct personalities, was super easy to roll with and made sense to me. And as a kid's movie that I had no context for, perfectly harmless movie. I don't understand why people hate this. That being said, I understand people hate this, and I don't even necessarily need an explanation as to why it's bad, because I don't think it's bad. I think it was probably made more for people who have no context for what The Last Airbender is, and also for people who aren't watching it to go see a Shyamalan movie. It's made for people to just kind of walk in without any of that baggage and watch this movie. And I think on those levels, it works perfectly fine. It's not going to be anybody's favorite movie, but it's also not awful. And I think it's spoken as if it's awful. And I don't, from my perspective, again, as somebody who's never seen it and tried to ignore that it was a Shyamalan movie, it's not awful. World of Warcraft is an awful movie. Like if you're a fan or you're somebody who knows nothing about World of Warcraft, that movie's awful. Last Airbender, I think if you come in completely cold, it's not a bad movie.
So I got two theories on that. Mm-hmm. One being, I do think that cartoon Airbender fans just did not like the movie. Mm-hmm. Like you and I have no context, but I guess it was supposedly different enough and not in the spirit of it, or a bad adaptation. So they're not going to like it. Mm-hmm. And then at this point, it was popular to hate on M. Night Shyamalan. Like, there's been a steady decline in his quality. It's not like it's not like he had some like highs and lows. He had a high, and then you just look at it, and it's just this drop to low. So at this point, like, he was kind of low hanging fruit. It was easy to dog his movies and to rag on them and to nitpick them. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe people who went into it with your experience and came out like neutral or it was fine, we'll also be like, well, this is fine, but it's okay to hate M. Night Shyamalan, so I'm going to hate this movie too. Mm-hmm. Like, it's popular to say like, oh, he lost the magic, which obviously he did and has. But I think then people were then judging his movies through an unfair lens.
Yeah, and like, if anything, you could probably accuse him of selling out with The Last Airbender.
Yeah.
Right? Like, kind of abandoning the twists because the last couple of movies, the twisty type movies that he makes, like, weren't working. So he made a pretty straightforward kids movie that has fantastical elements, but zero twists. There's no even attempt at that. But the kids are, for what it is, acting well, has good CG, has fun action sequences. The characters themselves, like, they all have motivations that make sense and are well placed, and yeah, it's very competently made for what you'd expect this to be. Again, it's nothing that you don't expect it to be, and that's probably when you go to see a Shyamalan film before this and before the disappointments, people expected something more than your typical thriller. And when he couldn't deliver that anymore and then made a kids movie based on a cartoon, I think there were some Shyamalan fans who were, they were primed to hate it no matter what it was.
It's also my understanding that this movie got a really bad 3D transfer.
Interesting.
Because, I mean, this is 2010. What year was this?
2010, yeah.
Right, in 2010, 3D and making everything 3D was the hot ticket right there.
Yeah.
So a lot of movies were getting retrofitted into 3D so they could do like the upcharge and all that. And my understanding is that it was a terrible 3D transfer, and it really muddied the colors and muddied the whole picture. So people who saw it in 3D also got a really visually bad experience.
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't remember that, but totally makes sense for the time period. All right. So Last Airbender, critically panned. I don't think it did very well in the box office either. 2013, he makes After Earth. And at this point, so from The Sixth Sense to The Village, he makes them all with Buena Vista Pictures. Then Lady in the Water, The Happening, The Last Airbender, and After Earth, all different studios. So it's like he's moving from one studio to another, making movies that are not doing well.
Getting consistently worse, too.
Right. So After Earth, he makes with Will Smith and Jaden Smith. And it's a space movie about people that live on this planet. Have you seen After Earth?
I've never seen it, no.
All right. Let me get the official IMDb plot synopsis, because I've only seen it once. It's been a while.
I've got no context out there. It's been a while since I heard that one.
And it's been a while.
Thank you.
Okay, here's the IMDb plot synopsis for After Earth. A crash landing leaves Kittia Rage and his father Cypher stranded on Earth. Oh, they are on Earth. A millennium after events forced humanity's escape. With Cypher injured, Kittia must embark on a perilous journey to signal for help. Wow. My memory of this movie is very different than the plot synopsis. For sure. What I remember about this movie is, like, the family is stuck on a planet, which evidently is Earth. And there's these aliens who can smell you or see you or hear you. I don't remember which sense it is, but it can only do one of those things. And somehow you can hide from them by hiding under this, like, weird bubble thing. I don't remember
Okay.
the particulars, but it's like a survival movie where these aliens can come get you. And I think it was generally panned for not being good, but also panned because Jaden Smith was in it. And it very much felt like Will Smith making a movie with his son to make his son a star.
Okay.
And that didn't happen in the way that you'd expect Will Smith to make it happen. Jaden Smith is absolutely a star, but he's a musician / social media star at this point, more than he is a actor, despite multiple attempts at making him a big actor.
And a well-known Impractical Jokers tattoo.
Who was Jaden Smith? Somebody got an Impractical Jokers tattoo?
Yeah, remember Sal, one of his punishments?
I probably saw that, but a lot of those just mesh together in my brain.
Oh yeah, completely.
So
I've never seen After Earth, and I don't really. I mean, should I? I don't think I want to.
The only reason you would, it's not that After Earth is bad. It's just going to be so middle of the road that you're not going to remember it. But you're also not going to hate it. You know what I mean? Have you ever seen Oblivion with Tom Cruise?
No, because that just seems like another middle of the road movie.
It's absolutely a middle of the road sci-fi movie. After Earth is exactly the same.
I've seen plenty of middle of the. I mean, like there are plenty of movies on Letterboxd where I ranked everyone. I'm like, I don't remember that movie. 2.5, 3 stars, whatever. Move on.
Right, but you're also not angry at the movie, right?
No, I just have no memory of watching it. Besides the fact that I definitely saw a movie called this.
Whereas Shyamalan haters act like After Earth is like a sin against filmmaking. It's not. It is just is what it is, a middle of the road sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
Just like The Last Airbender is just a kid's adaptation of something that the original people didn't like. You know what I mean? Like people who love it didn't like. So, I mean, you can point to The Happening and say that's a bad movie. I think you can point to Old and say that's a bad movie. But I don't think you can point to The Last Airbender or After Earth and say they're bad. They're just not Shyamalan, what you expect from a good Shyamalan movie.
Mm-hmm.
So,
no.
All right. Next up, what do we have? I moved away from the page.
Is The Visit next?
The Visit. So this is maybe the only movie since maybe The Village that I like from M. Night.
Okay.
The Visit is super interesting. So After Earth, he just got, one critical pounding after another, much less from the public, right? People had lost most confidence in him as a filmmaker. And so he made this small found footage movie called The Visit, where these kids go to visit their grandparents. And one's like 15 or 16, the other one's younger, like maybe 12 or 13. And over the course of the movie, they realize that their parents or their grandparents are murderous.
Are murderers or murdered?
Murderous.
A murderess. Okay.
And are trying to murder them, like as they're visiting their grandparents.
Yeah.
And so I don't know how much I want to say about this movie because it does have twists and they're interesting and it's super low budget and it's found footage. So it's all like shaky cam in the moment stuff. And at the time, Blumhouse, which has done a lot of low budget horror movies, like they still do this, but when they make a movie with a director, they basically figure out how much money the movie's going to make based on the concept and the cast and, the director's legacy and all those types of things. They figure out how much they can make the movie for, and they just give the person the money and they say, go make the movie you told us you were going to make. And we're going to stay completely hands off because we know that if we put this out in the first weekend, it's going to make its money back. It could be the best movie ever. It could be complete garbage. We've already done the math. Even if it's complete garbage, we're going to get our money back in the first weekend. And if it's not complete garbage, we're going to make so much money. It's ridiculous.
Right. Because the budget is, not hundreds of millions of dollars.
Right. So Blumhouse movies, if you look at their filmography, there's a lot of movies you've never heard of. There's some you've heard of and they completely bombed, but guaranteed they didn't bomb money-wise because they got their money back. And then there's a couple that paid off in spades over and over and over again because they were made for nothing and broke big. So at this point, M. Night just wanted to make what he wanted to make. He got Blumhouse to give him the money. He made this, and it kind of brought him back. Like, not on a high level, but like it didn't get awful reviews. It was so low budget that like you couldn't really pick it apart. And it really only had one twist, as opposed to like his trend of packing these movies with twists. And I enjoy it. And if there's one later date M. Night movie to watch, this would be the one, I would say.
It would have been perfect for this episode. I looked for it. It was not streaming anywhere, and there just wasn't a way for me to get to it without other means.
Sure.
But it was definitely the one I was most interested in.
Well, there's definitely no rush, but if you ever get to it, I would say get to it. It's 94 minutes, so you're in and you're out. It's not going to overstay its welcome, and it's better for it.
Are there creepy old women in it?
There is a grandmother that's creepy.
Yeah, see, creepy old women, I do not enjoy that in a movie.
Sure.
Like,
I mean, that definitely happens in this.
Yeah, okay. So that might be a turnoff right there. I mean, I know it's horror, but that's like a specific genre of horror that's hard.
Yeah, if you never get to it, it's fine. It's not even in my top 500.
Okay.
But if you're trying to figure out what he can do late game, I think The Visit is decent.
Okay.
In 2016, he makes Split, which is a movie with James McAvoy playing a guy with split personalities who abducts some women. It's a psychological horror movie. And it's also a movie that was produced by Blumhouse Productions. So they took The Visit, the good experience with The Visit. They make another movie with him that's fairly low budget because it's all, in this weird underground place that he's just holding these women. It's like basically one room and a central performance by a good actor who's doing a bunch of different roles on his own.
Yeah.
Split personality roles. I mean, it's really more an acting exercise for James McAvoy than it is a movie, an M. Night movie, to me.
Yeah, I mean, he's carrying the weight to this movie, playing all these different roles. But you also have isn't Anya Taylor-Joy in this too, as one of the abducted girls?
Yep.
Yeah, and she's kind of
maybe the same year as The Witch, I think, or a year after, maybe. I don't remember.
Very close. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, you've seen Split?
I did. I liked this movie.
It's all right.
Yeah, I thought as a psychological thriller, it was good. James McAvoy was, pulling it off, playing all these different roles. The split personality is a bit of a movie trope, kind of made up, but it's fine. It's a movie. I was digging that. What I didn't like is how they tried to tie this into the Unbreakable verse.
Sure. It definitely feels like a afterthought at the end.
Well, so it was. And I'm pretty sure when Shyamalan went to the Blumhouse with this idea, there was he at least didn't tell Blumhouse, this is going to be in the Unbreakable verse. Like he just said, this is the movie. And then while he was making it, he called up Bruce Willis and was like, hey, I have this idea. Can you come out for a day? And Bruce is like, sure, why not? And then so they kind of tack that on and deliver the movie with that ending. And Blumhouse is like, fine, whatever.
Right. Yeah. And I think most people enjoyed this as it was kind of hailed as like somewhat a return to form, at least like a return to, he's looping back into his good movies, and this one wasn't bad. It's certainly James McAvoy is what makes this movie for sure. It's not the direction.
Definitely.
not that the direction's bad. It's just exactly what it should be to let James McAvoy shine with his, with his acting chops of running through these personalities. And then at the end, you get this weird tack on that loops it back into the things people remember positively about M. Night. So Split happens. Then the next movie he moves into is what? After Split, you've got Glass.
Glass, yeah.
Just 3 years later, which is Split isn't really a sequel to Unbreakable. I mean, it kind of is, but it's more kind of like a spin-off movie that loops in. Whereas
Correct.
Glass is more a direct sequel to Unbreakable. Brings back Samuel L. Jackson as Mr. Glass. Brings back Bruce Willis as a main character as Mr. Unbreakable. I don't remember what his name is. And then you've got the James McAvoy multiple personality character in the same universe. Have you seen Glass?
I have not.
Okay.
I was after seeing Split, I was interested in Glass, but the reviews weren't great, so I thought it was worth my time.
Yeah, it was not offensively bad like Old was to me, but it's also not Unbreakable. Or is it Split? You know what I mean? It's some weird amalgamation of the two. And I won't spoil it, but the bulk of it takes place in like an insane asylum type of thing where they're all being held against their will and like tested by like scientists and stuff like that. And this is all like very early plot. And then the bulk of the movie is like them trying to escape this institution. And then once they escape, they fight. End of movie.
Sounds like a thrilling superhero movie.
Yeah, but Glass was also done on a very conservative budget, which means that the bulk of it are in these prison cells. And then they spend a lot of money on this final battle. And so it's a very lopsided movie. And Unbreakable is relatively low budget.
Yeah.
But it's all in the acting, right? There's never a need for a big battle, CGI filled battle scene. And in Glass, they felt the need. And so they did it.
This brings us to Old. What was the budget for Old? Do we see that?
I don't know. I can't imagine it's much.
No, it's, I mean, obviously like the beach was, well, even at one point they scanned the water on the beach and the water looked fake. And I couldn't tell, like, are they on actual beach or are they just on sand with like CG water coming in for some scenes?
Yeah. So according to Wikipedia, the rumored budget was 18 million.
18. And they spent it all on the rocks.
I don't know what they spent it on. They spent it on multiple camera passes.
There was this isn't a nitpick, it's just something funny I noticed. There was one part where the adult kids were swimming through the coral. And like the coral's got all these spikes to it, right? And at one point, one of the kids, like one of the actors, bumps the piece of coral. And like it's obviously rubber and it starts flopping in the water. And I just like it's not a dig on the movie. I just got a little kick out of like, yeah, that's rubber. Okay.
Yeah. There were lots of things like that where you're just like, okay, what are we doing here? All right. So that's it. That's M. Night's entire filmography. We could probably rank each other's at this point, but we're still going to go through our rankings. Maybe there's a surprise here or there. But we're gonna, instead of bouncing, we'll just go one person runs the list and then the other.
Perfect.
You want to go first?
How about you go ahead?
Okay. So I've seen 12 of them, all but his very first two, which I'll probably never watch, except for maybe Wide Awake because Julia Stiles is in it. So my number 12 is Old. Probably the movie I dislike the most of his. Right behind it is The Happening. The Happening is not a fun movie to watch. It's bad, not
it's bad.
Fun bad. Yeah. Glass is fine. but I'd still think that's a less than average sequel to, like, I don't love Split, but I think Split is decent. Whereas Glass just kind of ruins all the goodwill that Split brought back to M. Night's name. Then After Earth, perfectly fine sci-fi movie that you won't remember. Number 8 is Lady in the Water, which is a movie that I enjoyed watching once and have never seen since. Then you've got Split, which is interesting and worthy of being seen just for James McAvoy if you like horror movies. If you don't like horror movies, don't care about James McAvoy, you're fine not watching it. My number 6, The Last Airbender. I had fun with it.
Good. Good.
I don't know what to tell you. Number 5, The Visit. I gave it a 3.5. And there's multiple scenes in it that I remember to this day, 6 years on. I like it. If you like found footage horror movies, it's one to check out. Number 4, The Village. Another 3.5 for me. Enjoy that movie. My number 3, Signs. Another 3.5. I enjoy that one as well. Even the twist at the end, which is a little cheesy, but I liked it. And my number 2, Unbreakable, 4-star movie for me. Love Unbreakable. I think it's maybe the, like, what's that movie with the kids that have superpowers in the real world? Kick-Ass.
Chronicle.
And Chronicle.
Or Chronicle, yeah.
I think Chronicle is maybe on the level of Unbreakable. Unbreakable is more serious than Chronicle for sure, but those two movies I feel are level.
They're kindred spirits, yeah.
Yeah, Kick-Ass is more of a comedy, but Kick-Ass probably shares more DNA as far as like how realistic it is. But I prefer the over seriousness of Unbreakable when it comes to those tones. Although I do enjoy Kick-Ass. And then my number 1 in my top 400, The Sixth Sense. 4.5-star movie for me.
Great. Yeah, just as you're going through, my list is going to be very similar to yours. I've only seen 8. My number 8 is The Happening. This is a 1-star movie. It is one of my least favorite movies, and it is my and Megan's mark of like what's a bad movie. So it'll always be down there because that's my water lot line right there.
Sure.
Number 7 though is old and not much better.
Sure.
Number 6, Lady in the Water. I remember liking it less as time went by. Maybe it's worth a re-examine, but I could probably move on from it. Number 5 is Signs. I think this is the movie that I want to rewatch almost the most of any of these 8 because it's been a long time since I've seen Signs. And see if it still holds up or has it aged. Number 4 is Split. I enjoyed Split. I thought it was really like all the reasons we said before, minus the whole connection to the Unbreakable verse, but they didn't even ruin the movie for me. But as a standalone thriller, I thought it was pretty good. Number 3, The Village. This is definitely top 3 for me. I still like The Village. Number 2 is Unbreakable. If you had asked me 15 years ago, what's my favorite Shyamalan movie, I probably would have said Unbreakable. But over time, I've definitely thought a lot more about Sixth Sense than Unbreakable, and that's why Sixth Sense is number 1. I mean, that his first big movie hit it out the park, and he hasn't been able to do it since.
Yeah. I think the only ones we flopped were Signs and Split.
Yeah, you had Signs number 3 for you?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so mine's a little bit lower. But yeah, other than that, we're pretty much in line.
Yeah. And I would guess that most people who make this list, maybe on my list, Last Airbender would be lower. But I think generally, this would be most people's version.
Yeah, I don't think there's
M9.
any huge shocks in this list.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. Well, thank you for listening to this episode 489 of the Cinereelists. We appreciate your listenership. Don't forget, you can always send us an email to heyguys@cinereelists.com, REEL with an S on the end. Send a comment, a question, a list suggestion, a movie suggestion. Maybe you've seen Old and you completely disagree with us. I would love to hear some defense of Old. Not sure there is one, but have at it if you feel inspired. You could also follow us on Patreon at patreon.com/Cinereelists. You could leave us an Apple Podcast review. Again, if you have not done that, it's the end of the podcast. Might as well do it now. You could also follow us on social media on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Cinereelists, or you could follow me on my personal Twitter or Letterboxd account at EOJRB.
You can find me on Letterboxd at PeterSKB.
Nice. Next week, the tentative plan is to review The Green Knight.
Correct.
Which is a movie I've already seen.
Oh, I'm going to go see it this week, and I am super pumped for this movie.
Cool.
And the return of Zach next week, too.
Yeah, absolutely. We are going to...
Bring Zach back. Bring Zach back. Bring Zach back. Bring Zach back. Bring Zach.
Can't wait.
Can't wait.
We'll see you guys next time. Until then, keep it cinereal.
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.
All right. This is spoiler talk for Old. If you have not seen Old, and you don't want it spoiled for you, you should not be listening to this. If you have seen Old or you don't care, listen on, because we're going to spoil everything about Old. What there is to spoil. I mean, there actually is quite a lot to spoil, although I think you won't like it. I think most people won't like it on its surface before you even get to the spoilery stuff. But
I think we can spoil the deaths.
Yeah.
And we can spoil both the explanation for the aging and the explanation for why they are on that beach. Because all those things are revealed, but you're not going to like it.
Right. And those things didn't necessarily bother me. It's more that he didn't loop it into a bigger reason as to why we were watching this.
The explanation of why they were aging, I had the least issue with.
Sure, because it's also the one he left the most nebulous.
Right. It's like a step below magic, which is fine. Like we can just have it. We're in spoiler section. We can just get into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have taken that any day, even for the explanation of why they're there. Like why the hotel part, just start the movie, have people walk out on the beach. That's it. They start aging. Done. There does not need to be any hotel. There does not need to be a bunch of people with medical conditions. There does not need to be the weird scientists running experiments through the hotel. All that stuff was fine. I understand that was the movie. I accept that as part of the movie. But if you're trying to make a movie about how people reevaluate their lives because all of a sudden it's sped up, none of that is necessary to tell that story. And from what I understand, none of that is in the graphic novel.
Okay, so I was talking about this beforehand. Like, I don't know what's original source material and what is M. Night Shyamalan making it up for his own purposes.
From what I understand, the hotel wrapper and the scientists are his invention.
Is it same for all the people? So in this movie, we find out everyone on that beach, or at least someone in their family, because they just said, let's just throw the whole family on there, has some sort of medical condition, right? Some sort of terminal disease or untreatable condition like epilepsy or cancer. So, and the hotel has, I'll keep going, right?
Spoiler.
Spoil the whole damn thing. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
And the hotel has discovered that this beach, surrounded by these weird magnetic rocks, has this property where it'll cause people to age pretty much a lifetime in 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And the hotel is using this to test medical drugs to see if they can cure things like cancer and epilepsy. But instead of having to do a lifelong study over 70 years, they can do a lifelong study over 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's the movie.
Right.
Which, I mean, the implication here is that this hotel is killing every week. I don't know, every day, every week. They're killing probably 7 patients who are either terminal ill or have some sort of lifelong condition, and their families. Like we find out for no reason.
Killing their families for no reason.
Yeah, there's like Gail Garcia, Vicky, what's her name? The German actress.
Vicky Creeps. Yeah,
Vicky Creeps. We find out she has cancer, which, by the way, they cut the tumor out with a penknife on the beach. Look at that. That's its own thing. We found out she has cancer. But her husband and her 2 kids, who are ages 6 and 10, for all we know, they're fine. There's no reason they have to be part of this experiment.
And so is he. They're a family of 4 that they're killing all 4 of them because they want her to speed up her tumor.
Yeah. So that's a ton of collateral damage. And I could buy that if you had like 1 or 2 scientists in the know on this.
Mm-hmm.
But in the reveal, we see this lab, which has at least 20 scientists. And we're talking like lab techs who are probably getting paid like $50,000 a year. And they all know what's going on and they all seem fine with it. And I just don't buy that you can get a group of 20 people, unless they're getting paid a ton of money and have no conscience, who would be fine with killing families every week for the name of science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they kind of justify it because 1 out of these, I don't know how many people, 8 people that were on the beach, one of them had a drug that she took a drug that made it so that over the course of what would be compared to 17 years, she didn't have like an epileptic seizure or something like that.
Yeah, like they cured epilepsy.
A person who was having regular epileptic seizures didn't have a seizure for the equivalent of 17 years, something like that. And so we're to assume, based on what the movie's telling us, that they're justifying killing people quickly using experimental drugs to test over this amount of time, and it's all just collateral damage in the name of science.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a perfectly fine concept, but again, it doesn't serve what the movie could have been, as far as like a commentary on people slowing down and looking at the bigger picture of their relationships with people. And there was just so much to be explored there that's far more human than that Twilight Zone-esque twist.
Yeah. Well, it's not even a twist. It's
right,
more
it's
just like
so
an explanation.
Thrown in your face.
Right. Yeah. Like we figure out as an audience, like they figure out pretty early they're aging, and they even do the math. They're even like, oh yeah, I think every half hour we're aging 5 years. Like it's some dumb, it doesn't matter. But they, for whatever reason, they have to figure out like how long time passes so they can then predict when things will happen, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter. Like that's not what's important. So for you, was your best moment the conversation the husband and wife have on the beach?
Yeah, at the end when they've given up on trying to leave the beach.
Right. When they actually slow down and talk to each other.
Right. And that dialogue was not Oscar worthy, but at least it wasn't cringe worthy. I mean, like that dialogue sounded like 2 humans who had realized that they were not going to get out of this and that this was their opportunity to come to terms with their relationship issues. And it read like that. Again, 30 seconds out of a 2-hour movie.
Yeah.
If he could have peppered that throughout the movie, it would have moved me along a little better. It was a little too late at that point for me. But that 30 seconds is what I see in all of Unbreakable and The Sixth Sense. Is like the high concept wrapped around human concepts to marry the two in an interesting I wouldn't say those Sixth Sense or Unbreakable are fun, but I would say they're human.
Yeah.
Whereas this just does not play like a human made it. And also what those movies have that this doesn't is like, he's just beating you over the head with things that you know are going to come later. And I don't know if it's just the baggage that comes with his name, but like, you know, you get there, the woman's talking weird about the drinks. The guy who's checking you in is saying things that normal humans don't say. And then like, there's this other kid that's kind of creepy. That's a kid. That's
the kid with the notes.
Yeah. The kid with the notes is acting weird, which is also weird. Cause in the end, that kid's not supposed to be weird, but he was acting weird.
Yeah.
I fully expected him to be somebody who reverse aged in the end.
Yeah, me too.
Did you think the same thing? I was like, he's acting so weird, it's got to be something like that, and then it wasn't.
It's gotta be like the guy's father or something, like a Benjamin Button thing going on here.
Yeah, and they didn't do that, which just proves again that he can't get good performances out of kids anymore, evidently. But anyway, so you've got that. Then you've got M. Night himself driving the families to the beach and then making all these weird excuses as to why he can't walk to the beach.
Oh,
and it's
that's
just like
right. Yeah.
very plainly like this series of events that's supposed to make you suspect what's going on. And so if that's not enough for you to be like, okay, there's a bigger twist here, then like within 10 minutes of them figuring out their aging, there's clearly people on the mountains around them watching them. And it's like, why are you giving us all these hints? Don't give us hints.
Like right away, you figure this is some sort of experiment. We don't know why.
Yeah, you don't know why the people at the hotel have forced these people onto this beach so that they can age. But you're going to make it very clear to us that that's what's happening here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To the extent that by the time you get to the end, you're just like, okay. You explained it to us, but who cares?
Like, makes sense to me. Yeah, right. Like it all lines up. I wouldn't say this movie has plot holes in it. In fact, it fills every potential plot hole with plot. Like it's overworked.
The only plot hole it doesn't fill is why the rocks age people, which remains the only interesting thing about the movie.
Because
is the thing that wasn't explained to us.
Because this is 2021, and in 2021, our movies have magnets, be it to grab cars or to age people. Magnetism is our theme.
All right, magnets. How do they
magnets. What I thought was the second best part of the movie, and where the movie could have ended, was so you have the couple. They have their conversation on the beach about like slowing down and finally recognizing they should recognize each other because they're fighting through the whole time. Then they die because now they're 80 years old. And then it kind of goes to the next morning, and the only people left are the kids who are now in middle-aged bodies, right? They're still 6 and 10, but they look like they look like they're middle age. And they say to each other, "Hey, want to build a sandcastle?" "Yeah, sure." And I thought that was like a beautiful moment of like these two kids like finally trying to be kids after all the horror they've experienced the day before. Even though they don't look like kids anymore, they're obviously still kids on the inside.
Sure.
And like they just want to stop and be siblings and be on this beach and build a sandcastle. And the movie honestly could have stopped right there. And I think it would have been more poignant and more serving of the concept. But then they have to escape the beach, and we have to get the whole explanation about why they're there.
Right. But if you just have people going to the beach and you just ditch all of that stuff that supposedly wasn't in the graphic novel.
Yeah.
then has to be a movie about people and not twists.
Right. And about how do people spend time?
Right. How do they relate to each other as humans? How do they grow over the course of this weird concept, this unreal concept?
Yeah.
And that is something that M. Night can absolutely make. He's made it at least twice with Sixth Sense and Unbreakable. And in my opinion, with The Village too. Maybe not to the same end, but at least the people in The Village act like normal people. And in this, it's like he's never made those movies before. It's like a totally different guy who does not understand how to make things that normal people, where the characters appear like normal people. And yeah.
Do you know what this movie reminded me of, and what I think is a much better version of this execution of the concept being in service of the story? And maybe it's the sand thing. But both Zach and I watched a Japanese movie from the 60s last year called The Woman in the Dunes.
I remember you guys talking about it, yeah.
Right. And that's about a guy, he's hiking in the dunes, and he falls into this giant sand pit. And down there's a woman living in a house, and he's essentially trapped. Like, he cannot leave the sand pit. And this woman is constantly having to dig sand to save her house. And right, as a concept, it's ridiculous. Like, why would a woman live in a sand pit? Why do they have to dig sand? But that movie then becomes about like futility and the nature of work and Stockholm syndrome. And then there's even like capitalism, because you find out that she's digging sand to give to the above grounders who then sell it. And right, like, that is an interesting movie where you take a really weird concept, but you use that concept to try and touch on all these bigger themes. And Old has a great weird concept and just wants to kill people with weird medical conditions. That's all it wants to do.
And I think if it was written in like a specific schlocky way, that would have been fine.
Yeah.
But it's obviously written in a way where they want you to care about these characters on certain levels. And it just comes off as not that, for sure. And unfortunately it just wastes a great cast too. I mean, like the two leads, Vicky Krieps and Gail Garcia Bernal are great actors. Alex Wolff, certainly somebody who is hot on some level. I mean, like what's the you named the movie that he was in?
Hereditary and Jumanji are the two I can pick him from.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not doing too much heavy lifting in Jumanji, but certainly Hereditary is a prestige horror film at this point.
Yeah.
Then you've got Thomasin McKenzie, great in Jojo Rabbit, awesome in Leave No Trace, great young actress, certainly someone who can act at her age, and just wasted.
Just wasted.
and these kids, who I don't blame, they're brutal. It was hard to watch. It was the
little
kind
kids,
of movie
like the 6 and 10-year-old.
Yeah, the littlest of the kids.
Yeah.
It's the kind of movie that when they get older, if they want to continue acting, I'd be embarrassed. You know what I mean? I mean, like, what's his name? Haley Joel Osment. That's a guy who has grown up and has had a hard time getting acting roles as an adult. But he's somebody who can hang his head high. He can point to like that movie, his performance in The Sixth Sense. It might have been a lot of the director at the time, M. Night, pulling the best out of him. But he's great in that movie as a kid. There's no reason to assume he couldn't, grow up to be a great actor. If you're one of these kids and you grow up, you become a teenager and you want to be treated like a serious actor, not a chance you're putting this on your resume.
This is stay in school, kids.
Yeah, I mean, I halfway expected these kids to be related to M. Night in some way, because that's how it came off to me. And I'm not just trying to be mean to kids. It was not good.
Yeah.
It was not good at all.
I want to talk about the wildest moment of this movie for me.
All right.
Because this is where it lost me.
The tumor scene?
So, Well, okay, so the tumor scene was the first, right? The Vicky Krebs, we find out she's got a tumor, a small tumor in her abdomen.
Mm-hmm.
And then over the course of a minute, because everything happens faster, this tumor grows from like a golf ball size to a cantaloupe size.
Mm-hmm. They literally say that.
Yeah,
it used to be a golf ball. Now it's a cantaloupe. I was like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Could you please spell it out for us a little more?
I'm not guessing. I was told this.
Right.
Now, right. It's magic. It's magnets. Like biologically, if your tumors are growing that fast, it means your blood's also pumping that fast to move all the blah, blah, blah. Fine. Okay. Let's ignore that part of it. Like, their hearts will be, they just age faster. Some biological functions seem to happen rapidly, but other biological functions seem to happen at a normal speed. Don't they even say like, why isn't our hair growing? Why aren't our nails growing? Someone's like, well, technically your hair and nails are dead. So on this island, only living things grow, which is just his way of trying to explain why aren't they getting haircuts and nail trims every 5 seconds?
Right.
Whatever. It's magic. It's fine. But there's a doctor and they remove a tumor with no anesthesia, like with a penknife. They cut her open. He's about to remove the tumor and he's like, oh wait, it's attached to some muscle. Let me, okay, I got it out. And we know, I assume that like tumor removal surgery takes hours and is incredibly delicate because when that tumor is attached to something important, you want to take the tumor and save the important stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And like there are companies that are working on, like essentially lasers to remove tumors microscopically. A penknife ain't going to do nothing for you.
Sure.
Now,
plus, this is a world where the tumor is growing right before your eyes.
Right before your eyes. Now, okay, her wound heals so fast. They have to like put they have to put their hands in her wounds, right? That's the other thing. It's like wounds heal instantly.
Mm-hmm.
No infection, and that's fine. Okay, right? Maybe part of the magic is there's no infection, but then later, a guy gets stabbed with a rusty pair of scissors, which gets called out at the beginning of the movie. It's like Chekhov's rusty scissors. And then he dies of tetanus instantly, very gruesomely. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking, wait, so tetanus can spread across the body instantly, but someone be operated on with a knife on the sand, no infection, no problem whatsoever. Like that just seems super inconsistent. That's a nitpick. That's not the wildest thing. Because I don't want to nitpick a movie where it has magic rocks.
Well, that's the problem, though. It's a movie that has magic rocks that also tried to explain things that didn't matter.
Right, you're right. So it's hard. Do I nitpick?
Yeah, if you're going to try to explain 90% of it, you better do that last 10%, or else it looks silly.
It looks silly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So on this beach, you have our main kids, like Thomas and Mackenzie and Alex Wolff play them as teenagers who are 6 and 10. And then there's another family that also has a 6-year-old. And at some point, these two 6-year-olds become biological teenagers, have sex. We don't see it, thankfully, but it's pretty much like you see them under a tent and you kind of figure out. And then the girl becomes pregnant and gives birth to a baby within a minute, to which that baby then dies. Mm-hmm. Because it couldn't get enough nourishment because it was growing too fast. And I was like, what are we doing? Like having 6-year-old. I mean, essentially, these are mentally 6-year-olds, right?
Uh-huh.
Right? They're teenager bodies. And they say things like, yeah, my body felt different. I'm like, I don't want to hear teenagers attempt to talk like 6-year-olds about sex whatsoever. Mm-hmm. You got Alex Wolff screaming like, that's my kid, I'm the father. Like he's like having a meltdown. And then next scene, everyone's fine. Like a girl just did, like a 6-year-old just didn't have a kid on this beach.
Yeah, they move on from it very quickly.
Very quickly. And that was the moment where I was like, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What like, is that in the comic book? Or is M. Night Shyamalan just trying to be like, what if this happened?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't hear whether that part was in there.
Yeah.
I mean, even that, I think with some more tact and a different framing device, you probably could have pulled that off and still made it a learning moment for characters. But instead, it's just a moment of shock.
Right. It's
in M. Night's hands.
Right. It's for, it'd been one thing if like this 6-year-old's like, oh man, life is precious and I can't believe, consequences and blah, 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 blah. Like it could have been a weird learning moment.
Sure.
But a learning moment. But right. No, it was just, it was shock. And it's like a trailer scene of like this, woman's belly growing incredibly fast.
Yeah. Or in what world do 6-year-olds who have to get enough nourishment to be 16 in an hour, they get enough nourishment, but a baby doesn't? I mean, it was a stupid explanation.
Yeah, right. It was stupid.
It's like it was an explanation of convenience, and it's also a wasted opportunity. Like if you're going to give the happy ending, right? Then you let the baby live, and the baby escapes through the coral, and then and then the baby's like 10 and has the rest of their life. You know what I mean? But instead, you kill the baby right away because it's convenient to do that. Because
immediately, that baby is dead immediately.
Yeah. And you give other people. I don't want to say this is a better movie because I'm not a screenwriter.
Yeah.
But it feels like if you had kept the baby and had a 10-year-old by the end of the movie, you would have given more motivation for these characters to want to survive, to keep attempting things. I don't know. It just seems like it was a wasted opportunity compared to just the write it off, get your moment of shock, then write it off and move on, and let all the other characters move on without any contemplation of what just happened.
None at all. No one wants to. I mean, I think maybe the psychologist does, like, while everyone's panicking, the psychologist does scream like, maybe we should talk about this. But I think, again, that was for humor.
Oh, yeah.
And not someone actually being like, yo, something crazy happened. Maybe we should all take a minute and process. The
humor in this, like the rapper is literally named Mid-Size Sedan. I mean, it's really, really awful attempts at humor.
Is that M. Night being like, man, rappers these days and their crazy names like Ja Rule and Mid-Size Sedan? That's a great one. I'm writing that one down.
It's just somebody completely out of touch, I would say, with any realistic sense of humor. I mean, it was brutal.
What was I can't even keep like every time they kept saying like Mid-Size Sedan. Like, did no one in this script be like, M. Night, maybe we should call him like 3 Chains or something? Like, we can still make a commentary without.
I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking at all.
So was he? Because we find out he was on the beach already. Like, there's a scene with him on the beach, and then a girl he's with goes off and swims, and we later find out, we find her body, and turns out you can't swim off the beach because of magnets. Mm-hmm. Was he just dropped off the beach before them, or was he there the night before? Like, I couldn't figure out, because if he was there the night before, he should be like 80.
I don't think it was the night before. I think it was just earlier that morning.
Just earlier that morning. Okay.
Yeah, that they got there.
Okay.
That would be my guess. I don't think the movie says that, but just based on the timeline, that would be my guess. Okay.
It was kind of hard to tell because they show the family arriving to the resort, and then they cut to the beach, and unexplained, you just see her like jump in the water. Mm-hmm. And then they cut back to the family. So it's sort of this out of context scene. And I couldn't quite figure out how it fit in the timeline, but I guess it was literally happening at the same time that they were going to the beach.
Yeah. Also, I understand that it's a challenge to make a movie where somebody, does a lifetime of aging over the course of, a 2-hour runtime. I get that that's a creative and a logistical challenge, but I can't imagine anybody pulling it off worse than this movie does. I mean, it's really bad. Like, even the adults, like, they didn't age realistically. The kids, I mean, there's like little explanations here and there for why like the kids are wearing what they're wearing, but for the most part, they're still fitting in their clothes. You know what I mean? It just like there wasn't enough tracking for that type of stuff. And there was enough focus on the fact that it's happening, but you're not seeing it. that it was like, okay, then if it's happening and I'm not seeing it and you're giving me explanations for why I'm not seeing it, then the stuff that I should see is highlighted. The fact that I'm not seeing it, because you're telling me through the visual language of the movie that like we're not seeing it. And you're giving us explanations for the things that you couldn't fix. And it just was just like, okay, why? I don't know. It annoyed me that they couldn't pull that stuff off better. Like by the end of the movie, they didn't look like old people. I'll just put it plain. Like the two main actors did not look like they were dying of old age.
No,
they looked like they were 65, not
they had
90.
Yeah, they had crow's feet.
Right.
And I guess he couldn't see and she couldn't hear, but I mean, and I think part of it is the fact that they don't, that since their hair doesn't change, they keep their natural hair the whole way through. So like they're not getting white hair. So, I mean, that's obviously a visual cue to aging. Yeah. But makeup wise, it wasn't good. Right. It was not great. I actually thought that the kids did work pretty well just because they kept finding like obviously different age actors who looked more or less like the kids. Like I wonder if they casted Alex Wolff, Thomas and Mackenzie, and then tried to work either direction. Okay, now we need young and we need an old version of it. So I thought that kind of worked, but it was also kind of silly. Like when Thomas and Mackenzie, first comes out, she's now 16, and she's wearing like her 10-year-old bathing suit. And it's obviously not fitting. And mom's like, oh, let's get you something, that fits you better. It's a little less revealing or something like that. And then she comes out in I would say, more revealing bathing suit.
Yeah.
And wears that for the rest of the movie. I'm like, okay, that's all right.
It's a choice for sure.
It's a choice. Yeah.
The other thing that this is nitpicky is like the explanation of why you can't get off the beach didn't make scientific sense to me. Like they gave us an explanation and I don't need it to make scientific sense. It's just they tried to make it have scientific sense. So like the way they explained it is like, oh, you're aging rapidly because you're in a high pressure area. Like the magnets have put you in a high pressure area. So just like deep sea divers, you can't come up to the surface very fast. But in order to get back to the surface, you'd have to move so slowly that by the time you got there, you'd have aged out.
Yeah.
So there's no way out, basically. But that's not how deep sea diving works. You don't just jump in the water and go to 1,000 feet down.
Right. You have to work your way down.
You'll die doing that too.
Yeah.
So that explanation, like they just walk onto the beach. It's not like they were walking down the canyon and then they passed out and then they were on the beach, which is how they explain people not getting off the beach. So if they had done that to all the characters, then I would say, okay, it works both ways. You pass out one way or the other. So their little explanation, again, this is nitpicky. If you're going to give me an explanation, you better make it make sense.
And they did. I didn't notice that at all, but that makes perfect sense to me.
It was just, I think where he went wrong, and he went wrong in multiple ways, but one of the places he went wrong is he wanted to make a twist movie out of something that should have been a movie with a bigger, like the unfair comparison is Mother, right? Mother has this weird high concept that plays with time where people are acting weird. From frame one, everybody's acting weird. And then over the course of it, why everybody's acting weird makes sense. But that movie chose to go the allegorical way, right? Which just excuses in the best way possible, in my opinion. Not everybody likes Mother, but I do. Excuses all the weird ways that people were talking to each other, because by the end of the movie, you realize it's one big allegory and people are not acting like normal people because they're not normal people. They're not people. They're a part of the allegory. And so in this movie, you have this bigger thing that could be used allegorical to have your subjects experience something that speaks to the audience. And instead of that, you're more interested in making a movie full of twists. And you end up with this. Just a movie full of twists that you're broadcasting left and right. and peppering with all these weird creative decisions and filling it with bad dialogue. And by the end of it, you're just like, what did we just watch?
And I would hardly call them twists. Like, if they're twists, they're bad. And they're more just like explanations that make sense, but aren't satisfying.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, if there had been a reason other than a little kid gave them a note for them to try the coral, and then they got out of the coral, and then you were like, oh, it's a big experiment, because they like made their way up to the institution where people are experimenting. Yet you could get rid of all that asking people their professions, because then you don't have to know that the guy's a cop. You know what I mean? Like all these other things that are just so extra.
I want to circle back to that cop thing, but keep going with your point.
So they get to the beach and they're like, oh my God, we're aging and we can't get off this beach, and we have no suspicions that there's anything bigger going on. There's no people watching us on the rocks and things like that. And at the end of the movie, the two characters get off the beach and then they discover that it's an experiment. That's a twist, because there's like no broadcasting, and maybe you leave in a few of the clues, but you make them far more subtle in the beginning. Then maybe it becomes that's interesting that now you gave us a reason, even though you didn't have to. You gave us a reason. But I don't know. I feel like we're just spinning wheels at this point. But
yeah,
I don't know. I didn't like it.
The cop thing is a trope that I don't like in movies, and like I'm not trying to be anti-police or go on some diatribe, but like in movies, you find a police officer and they can solve all problems, right? And in this movie, like the kids get out and they go find this guy who's a police officer, because at the beginning of the movie, little 6-year-old, whatever, Alex Wolff was like, hi, what's your name? What do you do? He's like, oh, my name's blah, blah, blah. I'm a police officer. So then they remember, oh, yeah, this guy's a police officer. These kids go and they tell this cop, like, hey, here's everything that's going on. And the cop, like, I don't know, calls the army or something.
Right.
One, was this movie even in America? Like, it seemed like a Caribbean island or beach. It could have been a key, I guess. But other than that, I don't know where in the world, like where in this country.
Maybe Hawaii, possibly.
Maybe Hawaii.
But I mean, there's only so many places this could have been,
right?
For sure.
Okay, so like, let's say that, yes, this was in our country, because number one, if it's not our country, this cop's like, yeah, okay, what can I do about it? Even if I believe you kids, that you adults who I've never met before, like, what can I do about it? And then number two, like, I don't know, like if you're just, I feel like anyone, if he's just a cop, can one person just like then all of a sudden change the whole thing and be like, oh yeah, let me make one phone call and we'll shut this whole island down? Like, it just seemed like
an operation that obviously has a ton of money behind it, and this one
a ton of money,
and
like the cop is flying around in like a Huey helicopter at the end, being like, "We arrested everybody." And I mean, I don't know, like make him an FBI agent, at least give him like federal power. But like this cop could be like, "Yeah, I'm a cop in Waupun, Wisconsin. I have no idea what to do in this situation right now.
Sure,
I can call my sergeant, but."
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just like a movie trope of like the cop can solve anything.
Sure. And like, let's say you're killing 8 people a day. Nobody's going to notice that everybody flies to this place and never comes back. Like, well, how long have they been doing this?
Right. He says something like, oh yeah, and we've scrubbed their social media profiles.
Sure.
That was
but they're going to tell somebody.
Comment.
They're going to tell somebody. They're going to tell they're going to get a dog sitter. You know what I mean? There's going to be some record even without the social media.
Oh, again, no. This hotel is like, you bring your family, your cats, your parakeet. We want everything. Your grandma, if you gotta, bring them all here.
Right. We're nitpicking the details, and it's just because the movie tries to fill in all the details. If they didn't try to do that, we wouldn't try to pick it. Like Us is a good example of a movie that has details. It occasionally has an explanation for things. But for my money, it's like the perfect balance of giving me just enough to be like, okay, I'm along for this ride with these characters because these characters are interesting and they're acting normal in an abnormal situation. So you can forgive some of the details. Like, it's not fun. It's fun to talk the details, to fill in the blanks. With this movie, they try to fill in the blanks so much, and you already don't care about the characters, that the only fun left in it is picking apart the stuff that they didn't explain.
Right, yeah, because it's like, well, why didn't you explain this then?
And it's not the kind of fun that makes the movie better. It's the kind of fun that makes a podcast longer. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah. like we're trying to screen rant here.
Talking about the details of us made me want to see it again. Talking about old makes me more frustrated with the movie than I already was.
Right. This isn't like a so bad I want to watch it again kind of thing.
It's so just bad that it makes me even more disappointed that, like, this person, I don't have like a personal vested interest in seeing M. Night redeemed.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that he can make a good movie. He did. And he can't anymore, I guess. In the same way that he made them before. I know other people like Glass and they like Split, and those are very different movies for me than what his original output was.
Yeah, he had some magic in the 2000s, right? You can have your opinions on Signs and Village, that's fine, but like I think we can pretty much agree that like his first 3 or 4 are pretty strong.
I forgot about Signs. I like Signs too.
Yeah. And then once you get past Village or Signs, there's we're going to talk, or we've already talked about this. There's a steep decline, and then it's just kind of like bumpy in the bottom there. But
all right, I think we have officially beaten this horse to death. We should probably.
Why didn't they have a horse on the beach? That could have been cool.
I know, it really could. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Hopefully that was enjoyable. I don't know. We'll see you guys next time. Until then, bye.